Good morning, and thank you for joining us for a brief overview of funding opportunities with the City of San Diego and the County of San Diego. We appreciate you joining us. My name is Michele Marano. I'm a Community Development Coordinator with the City of San Diego, and with me are my colleagues Leticia Franco, Senior Arts and Culture Funding Manager with the City of San Diego's Commission for Arts and Culture, and also Kelly Salmons, Chief of Operations with the County of San Diego's Health and Human Services Agency, Housing and Community Development Services. We're going to be talking about 15 minutes each to discuss funding opportunities with our agencies. And at the end of our presentation, we'd like to entertain questions. So if you have questions throughout the presentation, please use your chat option, and we have a moderator that will provide those to us at the end of the session. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start about opportunities that are available with the City of San Diego's Economic Development Department. And again, my name is Michele Marano. I've been with the city for about 20 years, working to ensure that all communities have the critical resources they need to be strong and vibrant. I began my career as an executive director of a nonprofit organization, and I feel really fortunate to now be in the position to help others fulfill their mission. Next slide. I'm going to discuss two different types of opportunities sponsored by the city's Economic Development Department. The first are nonprofit capacity building programs, and the second are actual funding opportunities for nonprofit partnerships. So whenever the city is designing programs, it considers its overarching mission to effectively serve and support our communities, and also our vision to become a world-class city for all. In order to achieve our goal, we do provide high-quality public services, and we work in partnership with all of our communities. Next slide. We believe that by strengthening nonprofit organizations within our community, the city is better positioned to accomplish our shared mission. And these capacity building programs include the Nonprofit Academy, which you're participating in today, and Nonprofit Academy workshops, and also an accelerator. Next slide for the Nonprofit Academy. Government money flows to nonprofits in the forms of grants and contracts at the state, federal, and local level to meet our community economic development objectives and to ensure proper stewardship of public funds. Our organization has a vested interest in ensuring the viability of our nonprofit sector partners. So the goal of the Academy is not only to grow existing nonprofits, but also to increase the quantity, quality, and diversity of nonprofits competing for city contracts. Today, you're participating in the 7th Nonprofit Academy offered in partnership with USD and the city. And part of the success of this program is our approach of nonprofit organizations as equal partners in our goals. The city is willing to adapt and remain open to the possibility of adjusting policies and procedures based on input we receive from our partners throughout this process, and we're innovative in our approach. So that leads us to the two other capacity building programs that have been established as a result of what we've learned in the Nonprofit Academy. Next slide. The workshop series is in response to nonprofits looking for more time to explore specific topics. And these workshops are free and open to any nonprofit serving the city of San Diego. They're offered in the communities where the nonprofits are located and where clients are being served. The Nonprofit Academy helped the city identify the need for more targeted training for small and emerging nonprofit organizations. And as a result, an accelerator program was developed, and it was designed for small and emerging nonprofit organizations who'd like to apply for CDBG funds. They have a 6-month certificate program to obtain a financial audit, and also provides training and consulting in areas such as governance, financial management, grant writing, and change management. Next slide. Now that we've talked about the capacity building programs, I want to highlight some of the funding opportunities that are available through the City of San Diego. On this slide, you'll see a handful. I'm going to be talking about the first two that are available through the Economic Development Department, and then my colleague Leticia will be talking about the opportunities through the Commission for Arts and Culture. The City Council offices also have programs available and I'll provide some resources at the end of this presentation for those funding opportunities. They all have very similar requirements, and so I will take a little bit of time just to go over what all of those overarching requirements are. So next slide. The city wants to make sure that that nonprofits that we work with are a safe investment. So we have to ensure that your organization has both the fiscal capacity and the program design to comply with the regulatory rules of our programs. So each of the programs I mentioned do have a handful of similar requirements. And the next slide. One of those is that we have a two-phased application process. The first is a request for qualifications, and really we're looking at, is the applicant organization ready to contract with the City of San Diego? Once that has been determined, there's something called a request for proposals. That demonstrates we're soliciting programs and services or the projects that you're proposing to be funded with grant funds. Next slide. In addition, the programs have general requirements such as providing articles of incorporation, an EIN number for your organization. We're going to ask if you have a nonprofit tax determination letter, as well as for nonprofit organizations registration with the California Attorney General's Registry of Charitable Trusts. Also unique to CDBG, there's a requirement for a DUNS number registration, and again, I will provide you with some resources at the end of this presentation for how you can get that if you don't already have it. The City of San Diego also has certain insurance requirements. Next slide, please. And these include commercial general liability requirements, automobile liability, and workers' compensation. It is really important for nonprofit organizations to understand these requirements so the costs associated with these policies can be incorporated into the proposed project budget. These requirements are also consistent among the various city-funded programs. Next slide, please. So the first funding opportunity I'd like to highlight with the Community Development Block Grant Program, or CDBG. And you'll hear me say that a lot, CDBG. It's an entitlement program, and it's administered by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. And funds are allocated to the city based on a regulatory formula, so we don't need to apply for it every year. It's subject to federal appropriation. The primary objective is to improve living environments, expand economic opportunities, and provide decent housing for low and moderate income individuals and areas. There's another session available to you on the pre-recorded sessions in the Nonprofit Academy. It's called Connecting the Dots. Are you CDBG ready? So if you're interested in applying for CDBG funds, I'd encourage you to take a look at that pre-recorded session. It really gets into the weeds and details of how to apply for CDBG funds. Next slide, please. When applying for CDBG funds, a nonprofit will be required to propose a project or program designated to achieve 3 different national objectives. Goodness, that was a rough little go at that. There are 3 national objectives: low and moderate income, removal of slum and blight, and urgent need. Historically, the city's policy has been to prioritize projects with a low and moderate income benefit. So a nonprofit can achieve that by helping low and moderate income clients, providing low and moderate income jobs, working in areas that have 51% of the residents as low and moderate income, or also providing housing to low and moderate income households. Next slide, please. So some examples of eligible activities or project public services. This is where a nonprofit provides direct services to clients. This could be meal delivery programs or college prep, childcare, workforce training, senior services. Sustainability projects are also eligible for CDBG funds, like multi-unit residential rehab or providing solar installation on single-family homes. Next slide, please. Another type of eligible activity is economic development. So this would be when a nonprofit organization provides technical assistance to maybe micro-enterprise businesses. Those are businesses with 5 employees or less. Could also provide business financial assistance and commercial facade improvements. There's also housing rehabilitation, again for single family homes, maybe to increase ADA accessibility, and facility improvements. So for example, a nonprofit owns a facility and they want to expand their services. The example here is La Maestra, where they had a file room and they converted that to a CT scanning suite for their patients. Next slide, please. The other type of funds that are available through the Economic Development Department are economic development funding. And there are two programs, the Small Business Enhancement Program, or SBEP. We love our abbreviations at the city. And then the other is Transient Occupancy Tax, or TOT. These are both offered through the city's Business Expansion, Attraction, and Retention team. And there are two different subcategories within each funding type. There are micro-districts and citywide in the Small Business Enhancement Program. And then there's the Economic Development and Tourism Support and citywide programs in the TOT program. Next slide, please. Each program is designed to meet very specific goals. For example, the Small Business Enhancement Program has two goals, one with a neighborhood business focus and the other with a citywide small business focus. And then with the Transient Occupancy Tax Program, one seeks to increase and enhance the tourism-based sector, while the other seeks to increase citywide-based sector businesses like manufacturing and innovation, international trade and logistics, and the defense industry. Next slide, please. Some examples of these types of programs are street banners, marketing materials, training workshops, and special events for the Small Business Enhancement Program. And then for the Transient Occupancy Tax programs, those include small business incubators, visitor marketing, and venture capital development. Next slide, please. So over the last 3 months, our team has been committed to supporting nonprofits as they adapt their programs to continue to serve the public and overcome their budget and timeline challenges. And some examples of what we've done is to provide contract flexibility for fiscal year 20 contract holders. So if you're a nonprofit organization watching this right now and you have an existing contract with the City of San Diego for the CDBG funds, we have offered scope changes to allow you to convert from in-person classes to virtual classes. We've offered budget amendments and also term extensions on our contracts. If you haven't already reached out to your project manager, I would encourage you to do that so that you can get access to those accommodations. We also made some changes to the Nonprofit Academy itself. As you can tell, the focus of this session is managing and leading through a crisis. We also pivoted a little and redirected some critical technical assistance funds. We had scheduled a spring series of workshops, and those were canceled due to the emergency. And so those funds were redirected to the University of San Diego to help them provide technical assistance to nonprofits in partnership with the Small Business Development Council, so that those organizations could have access to federal assistance programs through the Small Business Administration, like payroll protection programs. And finally, at the end of May, the City Council approved a recommendation for us to allocate over $3.5 million of both Community Development Block Grant funds as well as CARES Act funds to additional public service projects offered by nonprofit organizations. So those are specifically funds directed to nonprofit organizations. And our staff is working diligently to release a notice of funding availability for projects that would be specifically related to the prevention, preparation, or response to the COVID-19 emergency. Next slide, please. So for additional information, I do encourage you to explore the webpage listed on this slide. It includes information for the Commission for Arts and Culture, the Economic Development Programs, as well as the funds available through the City Council's Community Projects, Programs, and Services program. There are opportunities there to link to registrations to sign up for email distribution lists. Again, I encourage you to do that as well, so you can be notified of upcoming opportunities, workshops, trainings, and City Council meetings covering nonprofit organization relevant items. And next slide, please. So as Laura mentioned this morning, I would like to close with the city's values. We like PIES, in case you can see the abbreviation there. People, integrity, excellence, and service. My colleagues and I serve in solidarity with every person and organization working to create and sustain a city in which everyone has the ability to live in a safe, healthy, well-resourced, resilient neighborhood free from discrimination. We are here to assist you and your organizations, and if you have any questions, I encourage you to contact us using an email, cdbg@sandiego.gov, for a very swift response. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Leticia. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. My name is Leticia Franco. I am the Senior Arts and Culture Funding Manager for the City of San Diego Commission for Arts and Culture. A little bit of background on me. Before coming to work for the city, I did work in San Diego nonprofits. I worked at a social service agency, Casa Familiar, in San Isidro for 10 years. Started out there as their grant writer. And swiftly went into working in the arts from there, running their art space in San Isidro. Always working in development. I worked at other nonprofits in development, and that experience working in small nonprofits in San Diego has definitely guided my work here at the Commission for Arts and Culture, and overseeing our funding programs and making sure that there is accessibility and there is a bridge kind of being built between our city process and the needs of our local communities. We'll get right into our presentation. I'll go over our mission and vision, and then we'll talk about our funding program. So the mission of the Commission for Arts and Culture is to vitalize the community by integrating arts and culture into community life, supporting the region's cultural assets, and showcasing San Diego as an international cultural tourism destination. Our vision is expanding our world by celebrating creativity in San Diego. We have two funding opportunities in our funding program. The first is Organizational Support Program. This opportunity provides general operating support with an emphasis on the delivery of programs and services that impact San Diego's quality of life and tourism. OSP allows for general operating support, and if you're a nonprofit and have been working on development, you know how rare it is to find a grant that provides operating support. So this is a really important fund that we have at the Arts Commission, because it allows for our arts and cultural institutions to be able to pay for the lights and pay for the spaces that are integral to functioning in arts community. It specifically allows operating support for arts and culture nonprofits. So some of the applicants that we have are theaters, museums, dance institutions, music, heritage and cultural, and art service organizations. The focus here is the delivery of arts and culture programs and services that engage residents and visitors, and that there's an impact on San Diego's quality of life and tourism. Next slide. Our second funding opportunity is the Creative Community San Diego, or CCSD. And this opportunity provides sponsorship for projects such as community-based festivals, parades, and celebration. These projects should promote neighborhood pride and community reinvestment, make arts and culture activities more available and accessible in San Diego neighborhoods, and encourage people of diverse backgrounds to share their heritage and culture. So this fund is project-specific support for nonprofits. Some of these projects could be festivals, parades, celebrations, things that have and the things that happen have specific deliverables and happen in neighborhoods. Can we go back to our slide, please? Can we go to the previous slide? One of the big things for CCSD is that it allows for fiscal sponsorships. So unlike OSP, where you have to be a 501c3 to be able to apply for OSP funding, through CCSD, if you don't have a nonprofit status, but know of an organization that is a nonprofit, and you yourself are organizing a festival or some kind of cultural event in your neighborhood or community, you could be eligible to apply for this funding if you partner up with a fiscal sponsor. And to learn more about how you could possibly do that, feel free to reach out to me, and we can discuss ways for you to build healthy partnerships and be able to kind of provide these services and these festivals to the community without necessarily having yourself to be a nonprofit. Next slide. So all of the funding for the Commission's arts and culture funding programs comes from the city's TOT tax. This is the city's transient occupancy tax, and it is a tax levied on visitors and tourists to San Diego. Depending on how much funding is allocated to OSP and CCSD, the size of the awards will vary. So for example, in FY20, OSP funding awards ranged from $5,000 to $600,000, and CCSD funding awards ranged from $5,000 to $140,000. For FY21, that funding has been reduced to about half of that, which means that FY21 OSP awards will range between $500,000 and $300,000, and CCSD will range between $5,000 and $70,000. Our minimum award amount is $5,000, so if you apply and are eligible for funding, you will receive at a very minimum $5,000. And some of the things that kind of come into play when calculating our awards are the size of an organization's budget or the size of your project budget, how you score during the panel process, how you rank, and again, how much funding is allocated to OSP and CCSD. Next slide. This is a little overview of our application schedule. Guidelines are released in the fall. For FY21, we expect them to be released in October. Like economic development, we have a two-part application process. So the RFQ is due first, and that'll be due in October, November. And then we go through a process called the cure phase, where we review all of the RFQs for eligibility, and we'll talk a little bit more of that in a couple slides coming up. And then sometime in winter, January, February, you'll be working on your RFP, which is your request for proposals. In March, we usually have our panel process, which applicants are invited and encouraged to attend. So you're able to see the panel in conversation, reviewing all of the applications, and it is a huge learning opportunity. And then at around this time, in April, May, June, tentative awards are announced, and that kind of goes in line with the city's budget process. So as the city budget begins to allocate funding to OSP and CCSD, we're able to start calculating tentative awards, and then final awards are announced at the end of June, and then July kicks off our contracting process for the year. Next slide. Some of the eligibility criteria for, this is for both OSP and CCSD. Your organization has to be a 501c3. For OSP, your organization has to be an arts and culture focused organization. And for CCSD, the organization does not have to be an arts and culture organization, but your project has to be arts and culture related. But the organization applying for funding has to be a 501c3. So your fiscal sponsor would have to be a 501c3. Your organization has a 3-year history as a 501c3. Your organization is either located in the city of San Diego or benefiting city of San Diego residents. Your organization or project operates to fulfill a mission that aligns with the purpose of the Arts and Culture Community Festivals category of TOT funding, which are to enhance the economy, to contribute to San Diego's international reputation as a cultural destination, to provide access to excellence in culture and the arts for residents and visitors, to enrich the lives of the people of San Diego, and to build healthy, vital neighborhoods. Next slide. As discussed before, our process is also a two-phase process, the RFQ and the RFP. During the RFQ process, we're basically looking at eligibility, and then you move into, if qualified, you move into the RFP, where you get an opportunity to share with us what it is you're proposing. Next slide. So defining the RFQ, the process of assessing if an applicant is qualified or not qualified to contract with the city. So this is basically looking at the eligibility requirements that we've discussed in the previous slide, looking at the organization's administrative capacity, accountability through governance. So we ask for a list of your board members, financial management. We want to make sure that the organization has enough liquidity. The city's funds that are granted through TOT are granted on a reimbursement basis. So there is an expectation that an organization has enough funds to put on the project or programs beforehand, and then be able to request a reimbursement for that. So those are some of the things that we look at in the RFQ, and then to make sure that the organization has enough bandwidth to manage the details of a city contract. Next slide. The RFP is the fun part of the application, because this is when you get to share with us the programs and services that you're proposing. what kind of community engagement tactics you'll have, your organizational capacity, and you'll get to answer a question about emphasis areas, and if you are a CCSD organization, share your project budget. So this is basically where you tell us, who's working on this, what are you working on, what community are you engaging, who's your target audience, how is that audience taking a part in the development of your projects, what needs are you serving. So this is a narrative part of the application. This part of the application goes to panel, and a panel comprised of community members and field experts and representatives of all of our different San Diego neighborhoods and districts come together and review the applications to make sure that they meet the criteria for a qualifying RFP. Next slide. So that is our funding opportunities in a nutshell. There's a whole lot more information involved in that. If you go into our website now for arts and culture, you'll find our guidelines. This is what will be released in October for FY21. What you see here, or for FY22, what you see here is the guidelines for FY21, and these are currently still living on our website. So if you look through these, you'll find a lot of the requirements, information, a lot of the nitty-gritty on how to apply for funding for your arts and culture nonprofit or your arts and culture related projects in the city of San Diego. The guidelines will remain, for the most part, consistent for FY22. There may be some changes, and we'll talk a little bit about what's driving some of those changes in the following slides. We did want to address a little bit how we are supporting this huge shift that is happening in our arts community because of COVID-19. COVID-19, as we know, has had a huge effect, particularly on our arts and culture community, causing closures and cancellation of events, and so there's been a big effect. One of the things that we did with our current contractors, much like economic development did to provide support, was create flexibility with the city's kind of red tape process. So one of the things that we did was also extend contract terms, which meant that if an organization had to postpone an event that was intended to happen in April or May, but now is happening in September, October, or they're hoping it happens in September, October, they can request an extension. If an organization had to cancel an event because there was just no way around getting health and safety restrictions, we still honored their contract, and they were able to submit reimbursement requests for expenses already incurred, because as we know, these are usually year-round expenses in planning a lot of these programs. And probably most helpful was that organizations were able to request the full of their award immediately, as opposed to in previous years when organizations have to submit a final report before they can submit the final completion of their award because of the loss of revenue happening with our arts and culture organizations. They were able to submit requests for their full award funding and be able to put that funds to use. So that was very helpful. For FY21, we are currently in our kind of award phase as a budget process closes, and we are again working very closely with our FY21 applicants because again, they submitted these applications last year. A lot of these things have changed, so we're working with them as they pivot into what will be a new normal. So supporting them as they either have to change the format of their programming, change dates, just kind of renew their scope of services into a different direction to comply with health and safety guidelines. For FY22, as mentioned earlier, guidelines will be released in the fall. We're taking all of this information that we're gathering into consideration. Our final reports for FY20 will be a huge source of information and help us guide. We're doing surveys. We're constantly feeling the temperature on the arts and culture ecosystem to see how we can best respond and how we can best support the arts and culture community. Next slide. One of the things that was kind of an immediate response and served to support our arts and culture artists here in San Diego were two initiatives. One of them is already currently underway, and the other one should be coming in the summer. And this is really to activate and engage our artists here in San Diego. The first one is SD practice. Applications for this are due July 13th. And this basically will help to strengthen and diversify our city arts collection holdings by supporting San Diego artists in their artistic practice and creative development through the direct purchase of artworks. So for artists who want more information on this, please visit our website. This is an opportunity to have artworks from San Diego artists purchased by the city to be included into the civic art collection. Next slide. And the second initiative is Park Social. This should be launching in the summer. It's a $500,000 initiative where the city is commissioning San Diego artists to develop site-specific temporary projects to create moments of reflection in park settings. There is also more information on this on our website, so artists interested in this will have more information as time moves forward, as we are expected to launch this initiative in the summer, and it'll help to activate our parks and get ready for the city kind of full reopening and getting people back engaging in public spaces. And next slide. And on a final note, we did want to mention the city's and the Commission for Arts and Culture's commitment to equity in the arts. Last week, the commissioners released a statement of affirmation and solidarity, and most importantly, of commitment to really look at the way that our process and procedures could possibly shift to more equitably support our arts community. We have committed to that, and as part of that commitment, kind of expedited the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative that was already underway. We currently are working with an outside consultant to come in and do a DEI assessment of the city's past process and protocols and procedures to look at the history of our funding distribution and recommend how we can move forward and shift that in a way that is more equitable. Concurrently with that, we will be having DEI training. Again, an outside consultant will be coming in and doing training with staff and commissioners to make sure that we are acutely aware of any unintended bias and just aware of social engagement and how we proceed and how that affects our work. And as that wraps up, we will be releasing and doing a DEI engagement also with the public, and that is also on our website under our DEI tab. It's work we're very committed to and are very much looking forward to doing. And that wraps up my presentation. If you have any questions, please, we have a ton of information on our website. Please feel free to reach out to me or my colleague Carla Centeno. We kind of work in the funding sphere of the Commission for Arts and Culture and are ready and eager to field all your questions and get you on board as a funded organization through the Commission for Arts and Culture.
Okay, good morning. My name is Kelly Salmons. I'm the Chief of Agency Operations for the County of San Diego's Health and Human Services, Housing and Community Development Services. I've been at Housing and Community Development for just about 20 years now, working through a variety of housing programs, homeless-related programs, as well as community development. At the county, we seek to we have an affordable housing strategy that seeks to address housing issues across the entire spectrum. So looking at everything from homelessness, which obviously we have to talk about having a supply of affordable housing, so building affordable housing, supportive housing for those of our residents who need that lifelong support or even temporary support to become housed. Making sure that we're making available resources for our vulnerable populations, whether it's resources to get them out of homelessness or out of substandard housing into healthy, viable housing units, and then ensuring that we're providing the services to help them maintain those services, maintain that housing through their lifespan. All the way over into the far spectrum of achieving stability and self-sufficiency for families and whatever self-sufficiency may mean for each person that we work with. So in order to address this strategy, we provide funding for a variety of activities, starting with affordable housing development. Back in 2017, the Board of Supervisors authorized the development of the Innovative Housing Trust Fund, and to date, $50 million has been invested into that trust fund. We have 16 developments that have been approved over the last 2 years for funding. I know your slide there says 31 million. It's actually 41 million has been invested over the last 2 years. And the final NOFA for $9 million just recently closed, and we're reviewing proposals and are excited to see what sort of housing developments can come out of that final allocation of funds. The county has also started recently evaluating excess county property, so properties that the county previously may have had businesses or sites on that no longer were meeting the needs, and looking at opportunities to make that land available to for or nonprofit developers for the construction of affordable and permanent supportive housing. Another exciting funding opportunity the county received a couple of years ago was to work with the state on the No Place Like Home program. This program provides funding for the development of affordable housing for persons who are experiencing homelessness who also have a serious mental illness. So it's been a great opportunity to partner with a lot of for-profit and nonprofit developers and service providers to ensure that really our most vulnerable residents across the entire region have a safe place to call home. This is unique because we're seeing a lot of for-profit developers partnering with nonprofit providers to provide the mandatory service components that go with permanent supportive housing. 3 developments to date have been funded, and we currently do have a notice for funding availability open. Information on that is on our website at www.sdhcd.org. And so along with affordable housing development, as I mentioned, we realize that the services to get people into housing and to maintain their housing are also critical components. We are administering what we call the CESH program, or California Emergency Solutions and Housing program. This is a state-funded program, and we administer it across the entire county, and providing rapid rehousing and flexible housing pool activities. We've partnered with the RTFH, a Regional Task Force on the Homeless, to create a flexible housing pool, as well as other nonprofit providers to provide rapid rehousing to help people exit homelessness into safe, decent, and sanitary housing. Additionally, we administer the Emergency Solutions Grant Program. This is funding directly from the Department of Housing and Urban Development and provides a variety of funding for a variety of homeless-related activities, from rapid rehousing, homeless shelter operations. We also fund some security deposit assistance, primarily through our nonprofit partners. As funds become available, typically on about a 2-year cycle, requests for proposals are made available to the public, to nonprofit providers exclusively to propose projects to help serve this population. Through the state of California, we also administer a state ESG, or Emergency Solutions Grant allocation. And again, these funding sources become available through a request for proposal on a 2-year basis and fund the same sorts of activities. So from homeless outreach to emergency shelters, rapid rehousing, homeless prevention activities. Another region-wide resource that we are administering is the HEAP program, our Housing Emergency Aid Program. The Regional Task Force on the Homeless is actually the recipient of these funds. However, through a competitive process, the county was allocated funding, and we again have partnered with nonprofit providers to implement a rapid rehousing and homeless prevention program, as well as our public defender with the county has a housing navigation program that they work with incarcerated persons to help them navigate out of the justice system into housing rather than back onto the street. On a local level, a couple of years ago, the Board of Supervisors allocated funding to 2 separate emergency shelter programs, one being an inclement weather program. We partner with a nonprofit to provide hotel or motel vouchers for persons experiencing homelessness during times of inclement weather. So during extreme heat or cold or rain events, vouchers are provided to persons who are living on the street during this time in order to ensure that their health and safety is in mind and secured during inclement weather. More recently, we began operating a bridge housing shelter program. We contract with nonprofit providers to provide a little bit longer-term hotel-motel stays that is paired with case management, housing navigation, resource and benefit identification, helping clients come from homelessness with the end goal of permanent housing on the back end of that program. In fiscal year 19-20, we had a $13.2 million budget to provide these services, and that was significantly increased recently through the Board of Supervisors to just over $15 million in the upcoming fiscal year. in order to serve 350 persons and take them from homelessness all the way through that continuum to permanent supportive housing. Michele spoke a little bit earlier about the Community Development Block Grant. We also at the county administer the Community Development Block Grant as well, and our process and red tape is very similar, so I won't go into all those requirements for insurance and all of your contracting requirements. It's very similar. And similar to, as Michele spoke, the Housing and Urban Development through the CARES Act recently in response to COVID-19 released additional allocations to several of the grants that I've mentioned today to help us respond to COVID-19. The county received Community Development Block Grant, CARES money, Emergency Solutions, State Emergency Solutions, as well as additional COVID-related funds for the Housing Opportunity for Persons with AIDS program. We've just recently received these monies, and we're working diligently to provide recommendations to our board on how to best utilize these funds. They will become available through requests for proposals and/or notices of funding availability for our nonprofit providers to help us respond as quickly as possible to the needs of the community right now. Additionally, both Michele and Leticia spoke about flexibilities. Some of these funds will be utilized to provide our current providers with flexibility as well as enhanced funding for extra costs that they've incurred during this crisis to ensure that they can best serve these vulnerable populations that they serve. Okay, so in closing, if you have any questions about the programs or funds that the county is administering, again, our website is www.sdhcd.org. And all of our funding opportunities are made available on our website, as well as the county's BuyNet system. If you go on to the county's Department of Purchasing and Contracting's website, you can sign up for BuyNet to ensure that as opportunities are available for our nonprofit providers, that you'll receive an email alert notifying you of that opportunity.
That concludes our presentation. So we'll be looking for any questions that may have come through the chat at this time. So the first one is for the fiscal year 21. Will the commission still honor funds if the awarded event needs to be moved from in-person to online due to the current situation? I'm thinking that would be Arts and Culture Commission.
Yeah. So for FY21 applicants that are applying for OSP funds, because that is general operating support. We understand that a lot of that programming may be shifted temporarily to online and virtual platforms. And then when we are given the clear as a society to open up our facilities again, they will be going back to in-person. That is for OSP funds. For CCSD funds, we are currently limiting funded CCSD projects and programs to have some kind of in-person component. And the reason behind this is because CCSD funds are meant to activate neighborhoods and communities. So there should be a component of the CCSD project, while maybe not 100% exactly as it was proposed pre-COVID. There should still be a component that is activating actual communities and engaging specific audiences beyond the virtual platform.
Any other questions that we have? Read that one out loud too. How is CCSD scope adapted to fund community festivals and events in the time of continuing social distancing?
So similar to the previous question, a lot of the CCSD applicants that we have right now are choosing to shift the original planned date of their event to further in the year when social gathering restrictions may be a little bit more lax. Which would allow them a little bit more flexibility. We understand that social gatherings will be allowed in intervals. So this may mean minimizing your initial intended audience from 1,000 people to 100 people, or expanding the size of your site from a smaller space, which would allow for only, standing room only, to a larger space that will allow us to observe social gatherings 6-foot distances, while at the same time still serving your intended audience and still contributing to that neighborhood as may have been your original intention in your proposed scope.
Regarding the expanded CDBG funds, is the RFQ process expected to reopen, or will it only be open to existing fiscal year 21 approved organizations? That's a great question. We're currently working through that with the City of San Diego's process. The advantage of opening it to existing approved organizations is that we don't have to go through that pre-qualification process. That being said, many of those pre-approved organizations weren't necessarily looking at programs that I should be looking over here. We're really looking at programs that were to address the COVID-19 emergency. And so that's one of the things that we're evaluating right now. And we are working to quickly reach a decision on that because we want to make sure that we are reaching out to all organizations that might have programs that we would be helpful in addressing this emergency and pandemic. So that's the City of San Diego's response. Maybe Kelly, you could respond with the county.
Very similar response to Michelle. We're all working diligently. These funds were quite a surprise and came pretty quickly. So we're working very closely with, like Michelle said, with existing providers, as well as opportunities to work with new providers. As these funds do have to be used in relation to respond to or prepare to COVID events. And so, as Michelle said, many of our contracts and prior projects didn't have that in mind and wouldn't serve that need. So we're working very diligently to finalize a plan and hope we can get those funds out there as quickly as possible. We understand they're needed in the community, and that's our end goal.
We have a thank you. Are those all the questions that we have? Well, I have a question, and we have a little bit more time, so I can ask the question of our panel. What do you think a year from now is going to look like with your programs? I can kind of start with at least the economic development programs that we have funded through transient occupancy tax and small business enhancement programs that are funded with our business tax certificates. Obviously, I think, Leticia, you mentioned the funding is going to be cut in half for fiscal year 21. So as hotel rooms are not occupied as much as they used to be, we are going to see a decline in those funding resources. So I think we are looking at exploring how we can best invest the limited funds that we have to make the greatest impact in our communities. So I was just kind of, we're aware that that's happening, and we're looking at how to best invest our funds. With regard to CDBG funds and some of the federal programs, it's almost the opposite, where we are receiving an influx of CARES Act funds. And so our challenge over the next year is how do we invest those quickly, because we know the need is great and we know the need is urgent. And so if you have even recommendations or thoughts on that, please reach out to me, and my email is in the presentation, and I would love to hear some of your thoughts and suggestions. Did anyone else want to?
I think at the county, we're looking at some great opportunities over the next year with our federal funding sources, CDBG and ESG, and housing opportunities for persons with AIDS. The federal government has given us a lot of new flexibilities that we didn't have in the past, primarily surrounding taking away some of the limitations on how we spend the money in public service areas, in emergency sheltering with emergency solutions grants. So really appreciating that opportunity to use those funds in ways that we potentially couldn't have used in the past to make a bigger impact quicker on the community. So we're looking forward to that while we all still learn to work in this new normal of staffing being at home, and a lot of our providers and contractors, acknowledging that the work that they do, especially those who are working out in the community, has certainly changed, and looking forward to providing them the support and guidance that we can, and additional funding. It's always great to see, we're used to, as government, not having a lot of funding or having funding restrictions when it comes to our federal budgets. So having that extra funding to say, hey, yeah, we can help you. We can take that extra step and get a little more flexibilities out there to providers to do what it is that they're out there to do, and that's to serve the public.
And I would just add that as our kind of TOT funding is reduced, and as a result of that, our funding for our funded programs get reduced, it is really an opportunity for us to step up and find ways to support the changing needs of our arts and culture organizations. If before our focus was on funding, and now organizations are pivoting because it isn't just a loss of revenue, it really is an entire shift in our culture and the way that we conduct business and the way that we engage with the public. And so it is a huge learning opportunity for us as staff to figure out how we can accommodate that and how we can kind of continue to transform ourselves and our guidelines and our funding opportunities to really meet the needs, the changing needs of our arts organizations and our public.
Do we have any other questions that have come in? Well, I have another one. What are some of the reporting requirements for the funds that you grant out for community development block grants and even for our economic development grants, but particularly CDBG? There's a reporting requirement. So when funds are received by a nonprofit organization, we do request monthly reports on the activities that have been engaged during that month. And then we also have demographic information for many of our for our programs that have direct beneficiaries. So we are looking for, the clients that you've served. We're looking for their income level because, again, we are required to demonstrate that we're meeting the need of a low and moderate income community or beneficiary. And then we also do collect demographic information, race, ethnicity, gender, and household size, so that we report that to the federal government as well. And then, Leticia, as you mentioned, our funds are reimbursement based, and so with that also comes a monthly request for reimbursement. So it is administratively something that your nonprofit organization is going to need to be ready to address. It is definitely a challenge for smaller organizations to come up with those types of reports on a monthly basis. So just again, as Kelly mentioned, as we're all working from home, as we are all getting back into the groove of going into the office, many of our agencies don't have the ability to print or don't have the ability to scan something in. So that's one of the things that we're looking at as well over the next year, is how do we help not only small businesses but our nonprofit organizations be more resilient in times of challenge like this, and maybe how do we partner some of our existing programs. Let's say, for example, provide training and internships to opportunity youth to code and do web design, and perhaps partner those youth with some of our nonprofit organizations that we're assisting to help them design a web page so that they might be better positioned in the future to perhaps do retail online. So those are just some of the thoughts that we're chewing on. So if there are other suggestions, again, we're willing to hear them. I'd be curious too, I don't want to talk too long, but if there are organizations watching right now that have received funds from either of our organizations in the past, maybe send in a comment about what was your greatest challenge or what was a lesson learned that you'd like to share with the group. And while we wait for those to come in, maybe Leticia and Kelly could highlight some of their thoughts on that.
Well, I can add, we just released our FY20 final report, and you're an arts administrator when you get really excited about gathering data that comes in from that. But one of the big elements that went out with our final report this year was a survey to collect demographic data as far as geography of where services are happening that are being put out by our arts and culture funded organizations. So all of this survey data feeds into a map that we launched earlier this year, in March of this year. And basically you can find it through our website, but it'll show you the entire city of San Diego, and it's a heat map, so it shows you where the arts and culture programming and arts education programming are happening in the city. So while OSP organizations, for example, may be headquartered in certain locations, you see just how far their outreach and how far their services are expanding into all of our council districts and into all of our neighborhoods. So this is definitely something to be proud of, but it also allows us to see what neighborhoods could use a little bit more programming, and this is really where the final reporting and the information that we're able to pull from our current contractors helps guide future funding opportunities. One of the other things that we're collecting in FY20 is we asked our current FY20 contractors to identify 3 areas of technical assistance or capacity building or professional development that they could use in these times. So once we gather that information, that'll definitely help shape what kind of opportunities we gather beyond just funding, right? How do we support our arts community? How do we do capacity building? What are some of the areas, marketing or development, or how do you tell your story, or a lot of the things that we're already learning through Nonprofit Academy. Really focus on arts and culture, smaller, bigger nonprofits, and kind of really getting at how do we strengthen and grow our organizations in a sustainable manner.
As Michele had mentioned earlier, a lot of the funds that we administer are similar on federal or state levels, and so the reporting requirements can be daunting. I think something we found success in is that we do contractor orientations for all of our new providers, or even existing providers as they sign new contracts, and we found the organizations who involve more people in that process have a better success rate in meeting their reporting requirements. Contracts and agreements outline the reporting requirements, and those can be daunting. So bringing in the person or people who are going to be responsible for the reporting requirements is really a critical part of that orientation. The data we report it's great to develop a better understanding. It's great to see how far the benefits spread across the country, but when you get down to nuts and bolts, our funding is dependent on us meeting those reporting requirements with the federal or state government. So it really is imperative that as partners, we all understand the reporting requirements up front. We've certainly seen nonprofits who maybe didn't understand them up front, and trying to then gather that demographic, that income, that service data, especially services that maybe are provided for a short term, is very, very difficult at the end of a contract term. And so really just ensuring that you understand and ask questions, and I'm sure the city is the same. We'd be more than happy to get on the phone and answer questions regarding reporting. It makes everyone's lives better if we figure it out and have those conversations in the beginning.
Did we have anything come in? No, looks like we might have one.
We got one more.
Okay.
What funding is available in the short term for rapid response program? We provide therapeutic art programs addressing the effects of social isolation. Okay.
As far as the Commission for Arts and Culture goes, our funding for FY21 was allocated to OSP and CCSD per the mayor's proposed budget. And we're currently trying to find other ways to support and other resources to possibly provide some kind of support outside of that. But I would say for FY21, that funding has been allocated, and for FY22, again, our guidelines will be released in October. Therapeutic art programs are a wonderful intersection between health and art, and should be funded, and that is definitely something that we would love to help support.
And with regard to the CDBG funds, that would be eligible under an upcoming NOFA, Notice of Funding Availability, for our CARES Act funds that are available immediately. We are developing that NOFA right now in the guidelines. Because it's CDBG, or Community Development Block Grant funds, that therapeutic art program would be limited to low and moderate income clientele, or at least 51% of your clients would need to be low and moderate income. So that's something that our team provides technical assistance for proposals. And if that's something you'd like to explore once that Notice of Funding Availability is released, again, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to discuss that with you.
I did want to add something that I didn't add during my presentation, but both of you just recently mentioned it, this idea of orientations and technical assistance. We provide a ton of technical assistance throughout the year. We do about 4 to 5 different technical assistance workshops for the RFQ phase. and another 3 or 4 for the RFP phase. These happen throughout all of our council districts in San Diego. We have a ton of technical assistance online on our website, and we also offer one-on-one office hours during all of our phases. So the next phase will be contracting phase, and what you said, Kelly, was very important about kind of disclosing all of that information and all of the requirements up front, so organizations are fully aware of the commitment that they're making when signing on to contract with the city and the county. And these are some of the things that we'll be discussing during technical assistance for contracting, and everyone is welcome. So even if you don't have a contract with the City Commission for Arts and Culture for FY21, but you'd like to come in and sit in so that you're mentally prepared for FY22, these are open to the public, and everyone is encouraged to attend, because nothing helps more than kind of pre-planning, your road to development and applying for funding. So if you have any questions on that, also reach out to us.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because if there are any nonprofits watching right now that are receiving fiscal year 21 CDBG funds from the City of San Diego, you should be receiving an email today or tomorrow that announces our contract execution workshop. It will be virtual this year, and so please keep an eye out for that. If you don't receive that email today or tomorrow, please feel free to reach out to me and I'll provide you the details. But we are moving forward with our fiscal year 21 contracts, understanding that there is a little delay in that process because of our current work situation. And then again, we do offer technical assistance through every stage as well. I think we're going to wrap up a little bit early. Thank you very much for your attention and your patience with us as we work through being on camera for my first time, probably.
Yes.
And we appreciate it very much. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to send them to us directly or reach out through the chat option through the Nonprofit Academy itself. Again, my general email is not listed on this slide, but it is cdbg@sandiego.gov. And that will get you an immediate response. Our entire team has access to that. If you email me directly, I might have a little bit of a delay in responses there. And then maybe we all want to repeat our general emails just for fun.
Sure. We are at arts@sandiego.gov.
And you can email me directly at kelly.salmons@sdcounty.ca.gov.
And thank you very much for your time.